Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at some of our top stories. At least 60 people have died after a devastating blaze inside a shopping mall in eastern Iraq. The fire engulfed a 5-storey building in Kut City, with an investigation underway as a 3-day period of mourning is announced. Syrian forces have begun withdrawing from Sweden, with leader Ahmed al-Sharaa saying protecting the Druze citizens is a priority. The Syrian president, in a televised statement, did, however, say, "We are not afraid of war," after Israeli strikes in Syria heightened tensions. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has suffered a political blow as a key ally has pulled support, leaving his government in a minority. The Shas ultra-Orthodox party says it is leaving over disagreements on military draft exemptions. A claim by the Wall Street Journal suggesting that the tone of the pilot moments before the Ahmedabad Air India crash points towards the captain's actions has been refuted by several groups. Investigations into the deadly crash that killed 275 people are still ongoing. Military drills are continuing in Taiwan, with Taipei coming to a standstill as Chinese invasion protocols are tested. Tensions have intensified between the self-governed Taiwan and China, who have spoken consistently about reunification. Media reports have suggested that US President Donald Trump is set to visit Pakistan in September. US intervention relating to the India-Pakistan tensions, while disputed, has hailed by Trump, with trade another potential topic of discussion. A Trump-backed bill cutting billions of dollars of funds in foreign aid and broadcasting has been passed through the Senate, who voted 51 to 48 in favour. This vote is another win for Trump in his push to cut federal spending. Meanwhile, President Trump has hit out at MAGA supporters who are questioning his administration over the Epstein files, calling them weaklings. It comes as Pam Bondi fires Maureen, who worked on prosecuting Epstein, from her job at the Manhattan US Attorney's Office. We start this hour with speculations that are growing over the Air India crash after initial findings were released by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau on July the 12th. One of the speculations came from US media outlet, the Wall Street Journal, which released a report on July the 15th, claiming the Boeing 787 Dreamliner crash may have been caused by pilot error. Amid rising questions over the jet's design, fuel switch movements and AAIB's preliminary findings, the Wall Street Journal has surmised that pilot error was the primary cause of the Air India crash. The newspaper, citing assessment by US officials, said the black box recording indicates that the captain turned off the fuel control switches. The news report also brought up the cockpit voice recording, where one of the pilots is heard asking the other why he moved the fuel switches to cut-off positions seconds after lifting off the runway. But according to the recording, the other pilots responded that he did not do so. The Wall Street Journal report comes even as the preliminary probe hasn't been published. The fault of the pilots has not been established or underlined if the fuel switch control was the cause of the crash. Well, joining us to discuss this report that has been released, Vandana Singh, an aviation expert. Vandana, thank you ever so much for joining us. Questions raised about this report from the Wall Street Journal. Firstly, what authority do the Wall Street Journal have to make these assumptions before a full report has even been released?
Absolutely. Your question, my answer lies in your question, and it's the same. There is one preliminary report that came out. After that, nothing has come out from AAIB. Then there is no authority to Wall Street Journal or any other media house to come out with anything like this. It's incorrect, it's unfair, and it's inappropriate.
Yes, and Vandana, of course, a deadly situation like the AI-171 crash that we saw, devastating families and friends across the world, Indian nationals, British nationals, Portuguese, Polish, Canadian, so many families, friends, and of course nations still grieving from this tragedy. What does a report like this do to those people who are in mourning?
Exactly. So what it's doing is it's creating a sort of a psyche, a sort of a leading on to a certain point or a conclusion where actually it's just planting something in the people's mind, and everybody wants a full disclosure. Everybody wants a closure. There are lots of families who have lost their near and dear ones. A lot of people affected globally, and it's a national tragedy for us, of course, over here. So putting something out like this without any concrete evidence, without the AAIB's involvement, I think is injustice, is unfair and unethical. Over to you.
Yes, absolutely. And we're just showing now on screen the title of this article, and it's called "The Truth About the Air India Crash." What are your thoughts on this sort of title and the influence that media can have over situations like this, which are still being investigated? Do you think that there should be questions answered by the Wall Street Journal after this report?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because it causes a ripple effect. It is a cascading effect. It goes from one media house to the other media house, and media houses should act with a sense of responsibility, a sense of discipline, and a sense of professionalism. And if something like this is being leaked out and it says it's the truth, then I call it fake news. And fake news it is, because until you see the AIB's next bulletin, how can we come to conclusions? And what is Wall Street doing there to come out with such conclusions? It's actually leading on to a certain theory or certain narrative which it wants everybody to buy. And
Yes.
I don't buy this.
Yes, absolutely.
Over to you, sir.
But Vandana, stay with us, because we're going to now look at pilot unions who are speaking out and voicing strong concern over what they call premature blame being placed on the flight crew. The Federation of Indian Pilots has criticised the investigation process, saying pilot representatives were excluded and that drawing conclusions without a full, transparent, data-driven inquiry is both irresponsible and unjust. Their protest comes as a fresh US media report cites cockpit voice recordings, as mentioned, claiming the captain may have cut fuel flow to the engines, an assertion yet to be officially confirmed. The Airline Pilots Association of India also weighed in, defending the crew of flight AI-171, stating they fought till their last breath to safeguard passengers and minimise damage on the ground. Both bodies are calling for restraint and respect until the full facts emerge. Vandana, thank you for staying with us. Restraint and respect, key words that have been used here. Bodies talking about these premature conclusions that are being made. What damage could this have, not just to these bodies and pilots within India, but also to the industry as a whole, for this report to come out before an official investigative report has even landed?
Absolutely. So we can imagine that there will be more and more speculations, more and more confusion. We are causing this kind of reports causes more confusion amongst people, more angst amongst people, anxiety that it leads to. And I believe that such sort of reports should be rubbished, because until it's coming out from the source, unless it's coming out from the origin, which is AAIB, which is having a closed door investigation, how can even one come up with such conjectures? And it's not appropriate really to, leak this like this, because people then start thinking, what does it do to the pilots? What does it do to the pilots' unions? I mean, they are doing their job so professionally, And even in this flight, at the end, the pilot, when he realized it's low altitude and he can't do anything, they can't do anything. They said, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. It's an official way of, utter professionalism seconds before you're dying. And you come out with such things, the Wall Street Journal is reporting such things, then it's quite shameful in my view. And I encourage everybody to actually follow the truth that comes out from the Indian government and the lead investigating agency inside. Over to you, sir.
Yes, absolutely. And Vandana, if you can stay with us, we're going to briefly move away from this report that has sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. The deadly crash of Air India Flight 171 has reignited a long-standing debate in the aviation world. Should cockpit video cameras be made mandatory in commercial airliners? Aviation authorities and experts are now weighing up the safety benefits against privacy concerns. Willie Walsh, head of the International Air Transport Association and a former pilot himself, says video footage could significantly assist crash investigations, especially when questions arise about a pilot's actions or mental state. Proponents argue that cockpit video could help fill gaps left by voice and flight data recorders. But pilot unions, including those in the US and India, remain firmly opposed, citing privacy violations, potential misuse and fear that footage could be leaked or misinterpreted. Well, Vandana, once again, thank you for staying. Of course, the potential for cockpit video feeds being used in rare situations like this is a question that has validity, but we're seeing some opposition. Firstly, can I just have your opinion on whether you think that the potential invasion of privacy is outweighed by the impact on crashes like this, even though they're rare, the information that could be gained through those video feeds being installed in the cockpits?
Well, in my view, there is no harm having a proper full-time. Of course, there's a camera, a video feed would be nice. There is no harm, because at the end of it, there should be some transparency. There is a responsibility that one is taking. And if we have a FDR, a cockpit voice recorder, then no harm having this as well, because it also shows a sense of responsibility and discipline and professionalism, as I mentioned.
Yes, Vandana Singh, thank you ever so much for joining us to discuss all of those topics. We, of course, here on NewsX World will continue to bring you any debates that have been raised by the topics that we've spoken about, and of course wait for that final investigative report into the devastating Air India crash. But we move on now, and Taiwan is conducting its urban resilience civil defence drills this week as part of the ongoing Hankwang military exercises. The drills, which began on July the 9th, aim to prepare the island against potential Chinese threats. On Thursday, drills were held in cities like Taipei, New Taipei and Taoyuan, simulating air raids, evacuations and disaster relief operations. The exercises will conclude on Friday in the outlying islands of Penghu, Kinmen and Matsu. Typhoon Danas recovery led to drill cancellations in Taiwan, Chiayi and Yunlin. Taiwan's military tracked 58 Chinese aircraft and 9 naval vessels in the vicinity of Taiwan between Wednesday and Thursday. France and Japan have raised alarms about China's growing military activities around Taiwan. France's National Strategic Review highlighted China's increasing manoeuvres, while Japan noted a sharp rise in Chinese naval presence in its southwestern waters. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te urged Beijing to resume dialogue on equal terms, stressing the need for diplomatic solutions to ease rising tensions. Well, joining us from Taipei in Taiwan is Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst. Ross, can I firstly ask you what the past few hours have been like? Of course, you join us from Taiwan where these drills have been taking place. Can you just detail for us what has played out?
Well, this afternoon between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, you were not allowed to be outside on the street. So if you were a pedestrian, you'd have to go into the nearest building, cars and buses had to pull over to the side of the road, and people had to exit their vehicles and also go inside the nearest building. The mass transit stopped operating. People had to get off the trains and go to designated areas inside of stations. So it was a drill for an air raid or a missile attack. And actually, this has been going on for many years. It's not something new, but it is part of what is new is that the exercises were about 9 days this year, and that's double the length it's been in the past.
Yes, and Ross, looking at the international calls for easing of escalations, France and Japan both commenting as reports of sorties and naval vessels from China over the past couple of days operating in and around Taiwan. What does that global comment on these tensions say about the potential escalation of the Chinese activity around Taiwan and the potential for that invasion along the lines of China's want of reunification, potentially by any means possible?
Well, in recent years, we've seen a number of countries when they publish things like a new national security strategy, or when they have bilateral or even multilateral meetings with other countries, and they issue a statement that covers hotspots all over the world and has a lot of statements that we hope for peaceful resolutions. What we're seeing with greater frequency is that there's a reference to tensions in the Taiwan Strait that's often in these national security strategy documents or in joint statements issued at the end of summits. And it usually says that we call on both sides to settle their differences peacefully. Sometimes it says we oppose any unilateral change to the status quo. But none of those kinds of statements that show up in security strategies or joint statements at the end of summits, whether it's issued by Japan, France, Canada, the United Kingdom, the European Union. None of those kinds of statements change what China does. And what is China doing? It's investing heavily in its military capabilities to include an invasion of Taiwan if they decide to pursue that. So statements of concern by other countries, they clearly have zero effect on China's strategy or planning.
Yes, and Ross, to bring an end to this discussion, we have in recent times spoken about the Taiwanese people's sort of consensus and thoughts on the current tensions. But I want to flip that now to the drills, which are obviously ongoing, the impact of people's lives. As you're saying, people aren't allowed out on the streets during this time. Is there any consensus amongst the population in Taiwan over these drills, or is there an understanding that it is necessary in the face of provocation from China?
I think the public generally understands that the military does need to drill, especially with the increasing threat, especially with the military's acquisition in recent years of a lot of new weapon systems, mostly from the United States. Some are domestically produced here in Taiwan. So I think the public is generally understanding and supportive that large-scale drills do need to take place multiple times per year, including this Hangguang exercise, which is the largest annual drill that Taiwan holds. So I think the public is broadly supportive. Does that mean that the public is eager for war? Of course not. Most people in Taiwan prefer to maintain the status quo. They don't want to be part of China, but they don't want their government to take any actions that would antagonize China into launching an invasion.
Ross, as always, thank you ever so much for providing that unique insight. We here on NewsX World will continue to monitor those tensions ongoing. But we move on now, and the US Senate has approved President Trump's $9 billion rescission package, stripping funding from public broadcasting, NPR and foreign aid. The measure passed 51 to 48, backed only by Republicans. However, Senator Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski broke ranks to vote with Democrats. Meanwhile, to secure support from Senator Mike Rounds, GOP leaders agreed to protect funding for tribal broadcast services. Earlier proposals to cut the global HIV program were also dropped. Democrats raised multiple amendments to block or change the bill, but none passed. They warned that this could set a dangerous precedent for future repeals of bipartisan funding deals. Looking ahead, the bill now faces a July 18th deadline in the House. Unlike this package, future funding measures will need Democratic support to pass the Senate's 60-vote threshold. Well, joining me to discuss the ramifications of this bill that has now been passed through the Senate. Thomas Porteous, my colleague, anchor and correspondent here with NewsX World, joining me from the newsroom. Thomas, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us?
Well, Josh, as you've just said, this bill has passed Congress, 51 votes to 48. There was one Democrat absent and 2 Republicans voted against Donald Trump's bill and broke ranks here. The reason why this matters so much, Joshua, is the fact that Congress is actually voting for its own funds to be taken away. Now, this isn't like an executive order. This is something that needs to be approved by Congress, and we'll see how further this goes with a further congressional vote on Friday. However, it's very, very rare for something like this to go through Congress. The last time was the year of 1999. And as we've said previously, $9 billion have been taken away from the federal budget when it comes to $8 billion in foreign aid and around $1 billion in public broadcasting. This is significant, as you said, because foreign aid has been a hugely controversial topic in this administration. You mentioned it's going to have huge ramifications on humanitarian operations abroad, and also Democrats and opposition are concerned how this is going to affect people who have received US foreign aid in the past. $8 billion, after all, is a lot of money. As we've said, it's going to be Friday when we see any more movement on this. However, it's got 45 days to pass as law, and then if anything continues after that, then the rescission is denied. So we will bring you some more updates on this on Friday.
Yes, and Tom, just to briefly touch on the context of this, of course, Donald Trump has spoken openly throughout his second term about the cuts that need to be made to government spending. Is this just in line with what Trump has been pushing forward? And do you think that we could see further cuts like this being put through the House and the Senate?
Well, of course, Joshua, Donald Trump pushes a protectionist ideology. We saw with the Department of Government Efficiency, previously headed by Elon Musk, who made these huge staff cuts in the federal government. Thousands and thousands of people who were laid off. Many of those individuals were involved directly in foreign aid programs, and we've heard various statistics about the damage, the alleged damage it has done to previous foreign American aid programs abroad. You mentioned some statistics about how the AIDS program has been now set back due to these cuts made by the Trump administration. However, this isn't an executive order. This is something that has to be approved by the Senate by Congress, and so this isn't something that can be directly passed through the president. We will bring you updates in regards to this long democratic process as it goes forward and through the rest of the process.
Yes, Thomas, I'm going to ask you to stay with us for the moment because we do bring a breaking update, a piece of news coming out of Europe and specifically Ukraine, which has a new head of government. Lawmakers in Kyiv have appointed Yulia Sviridenko as the country's new prime minister, making her the first woman to hold the post in Ukraine's modern history. The 39-year-old gained international attention earlier this year for her pivotal role in tense negotiations with the United States over a rare minerals deal. Sviridenko replaces Denis Shmyhal, who served since 2020, making him the longest-serving prime minister since Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. Well, Thomas, thank you for sticking with us. This reshuffle reports were, of course, made days ago, but it needed confirmation from lawmakers within Ukraine. That reshuffle that Zelensky was looking for has now happened. How could this move strengthen Volodymyr Zelensky's hand in, of course, the face of continued conflict and attacks from Russia? Or does this potentially raise questions about why the change was needed and weaken Zelensky's position?
Well, yes, Josh, as we can see, democracy is still well in play in Ukraine. This comes in the background of many critics of the Ukrainian president calling for his re-election himself. But as you can see, he is still nominating people and making decisions in government. We've seen Donald Trump call Zelensky a dictator in this regard. And so, to give you a bit of background for the new Prime Minister, she has notably led US-Ukraine negotiations on the critical mineral deal, as well as playing key roles in securing economic and defense cooperations. It's been just a couple of days since President Zelensky has nominated her officially, and now she has been sworn in.
Yes, absolutely, Thomas. Thank you very much for providing that extra insight. We do, of course, expect further reactions on that announcement of Ukraine's new Prime Minister. We will bring those to you as we get them. But we move on now, and a new wave of violence has erupted in Balochistan, with armed attacks targeting Pakistani security forces in the Arawan, Quetta and Kalat districts. The recent assaults by Baloch freedom fighters have claimed the lives of 20 personnel, including a senior officer, Major Rab Nawaz. The region has long been troubled by unrest fuelled by grievances over resource exploitation, political marginalisation and heavy military presence. Baloch independence activists are believed to be behind these attacks, though no group has yet taken responsibility. Additionally, a separate incident occurred in Kalat where unidentified gunmen opened fire on a passenger bus, killing at least 3 and injuring several others. Moving on now, and severe weather has caused deadly flooding in South Korea, where 2 people have died and over 1,000 residents were forced to evacuate following record-breaking rainfall. The Interior and Safety Ministry reported that parts of the South Chungcheong regions just south of Seoul received more than 400 millimetres of rain, the highest per-hour rainfall recorded in the region since data collection began in 1904. The Korea Meteorological Administration warns that more downpours are expected through the night, prompting authorities to rate landslide alerts to the highest level in several areas. In the southern city of Gwangju, dozens of roads and buildings were quickly submerged, and more than 400 schools were shut, and 166 reported damaged due to the flooding. Emergency services remain on high alert as the situation continues to evolve. We'll now have a listen to some citizens who are dealing with this devastating flooding.
가슴이 무너지고 하늘이 무너지죠. 내부까지 물이 차가지고 쇼파니 냉장고니 집기들이 다 컴퓨터 뭐 이런 게 다 둥둥둥 뛰어다니는데 그 모습 보면 어떻겠습니까? 아주 진짜 뭐 죽을 거하고 똑같은 상황이 되죠.
현재 지금 서산시 읍내동에 비가 많이 와갖고 홍수가 날 경우에는 이제 배수구가 이제 시켜서 빗물바지라고 하는 건데 빗물바지가 너무 적다 보니까 요거를 이제 양쪽으로 이제 그 일부 구간만 하지 말고 전체적으로 쫙 폈을 경우에는 물량이 양쪽으로 흡수가 되니까 이제 제가 봤을 때는 괜찮을 것 같아요. 어지간히 비와갖고는.
Well, that is all we have time for, but we will be back very soon with more of your latest breaking international news. Thank you.